June 22nd, 1994. A day that will live forever in the minds of everyone associated with the sport of football in the country of Colombia. A day that would shake the world of sport to its very core. A day where a simple mistake on a football pitch would cost a young man his life. This is the story of the life and the tragic death of the so-called gentleman of football, Andres Escobar. When a legend of the game such as Pelé tips your country as favourites to win the biggest international competition in the world, it's enough for even the biggest cynic to at least take notice. This was the case for Colombia heading into the 1994 World Cup, with the likes of Carlos Valderrama and Faustino Asprilla leading the golden generation of Colombian talent into the tournament. Arguably, the jewel in their crown was that of their defensive talisman, Andres Escobar. The 27-year-old centre-half was quiet, well-disciplined leader at the back, who was as respected by his teammates as he was adored by his fans, earning him several monikers which reflected this, such as El Caballero del Fútbol, the gentleman of football. Plying his trade at his hometown club, Atlético Nacional in Medellín, Escobar was so highly touted that he had been reportedly offered a contract by Italian giants AC Milan before the 1994 tournament. Pelé's claims weren't totally unfounded, as Colombia proved themselves formidable in qualification for the World Cup. In their 6 qualifying games, they conceded just 2 goals while scoring 13, including a 5-0 victory against the Giants of Argentina in Buenos Aires. Coach Francisco Maturana insisted that his players express themselves on the pitch, allowing their natural flair and flamboyance to shine through. In 26 matches leading up to the 1994 World Cup, the Colombians lost only once in a friendly against Bolivia, which included a 3rd place finish in the 1993 Copa America, only being eliminated via penalty shootout to Argentina. So to say that Colombia were dark horses heading into the tournament would have been a huge understatement. Socially in Colombia, it was a time of terror, fear and misery. The city of Medellín was in a state of emergency following the murder of notorious drug lord Pablo Escobar. Despite being hated and vilified by his country's government, Escobar was beloved by the poor and underprivileged, for whom he provided housing and employment, as well as building several football pitches, many of which were played on by the stars of the Colombian national team as young boys honing their craft. It is commonly believed that Escobar was the principal financier behind Medellín's Atlético Nacional, which featured Andres Escobar in its ranks, which won the South America's most prestigious football tournament, the Copa Libertadores, in 1989. Pablo Escobar died on December 2nd, 1993, throwing the country into a new state of uncertainty. When Pablo died, the city spun out of control, explained his cousin Jaime Guevara. The boss was dead, so everyone became their own boss. Pablo had prohibited kidnappings. He ran the underworld with complete order. Anything illegal, you asked for Pablo's permission. With Escobar gone, permission was no longer required. Guevara's was a view endorsed by Colombia's manager, who had previously overseen Nacional's Copa Libertadores triumph and knew Pablo Escobar well. The law of the boss is the law of the land, said Maturana. When Pablo Escobar died, the earth shook and the wind cried, Pablo Escobar. As of that moment, you had to be on your guard at all times. You couldn't trust anyone. Even a policeman could be good or evil. It was against this backdrop, with frequent bombings and shootings reducing Medellín to a state of complete emergency, that Colombia's footballers set off to USA 94. It's difficult to stay focused, but I find motivation in the good things to come, said Andres Escobar. I try to read a bit of the Bible each day. My bookmarks are 2 photos, one of my late mother and the other of my fiancée. Somewhat ironically and perhaps rather naively, considering how Colombia's football's resurgence was bankrolled, Escobar firmly believed the sport could help put a stop to the violence that was destroying the country he loved. He saw soccer as a school of life to teach values and tolerance, said his friend, the journalist turned diplomat, Cesar Mauricio Velázquez. To learn to win, to lose, to embrace sport as a sanctuary of unity. Andres always stayed true to that belief. Colombia were placed in Group A with Romania, Switzerland and host nation the United States. Before the World Cup began, however, the Colombians found themselves in a problematic situation. Colombia's preparations were conducted against the backdrop of rumours of betting syndicates and drug cartels were exercising their influence over the squad. Whatever the truth, Colombia's players were affected. They looked edgy and unfocused as they suffered a shock 3-1 loss in their opening game against Romania, with their main man Georgi Hagi scoring the pick of the goals. This result left the Colombians needing a victory against tournament host the United States to keep their hopes of progressing in the tournament alive. Many gamblers lost big money, and there appeared a sort of dark hand that was very upset with the team's performance, according to Velasquez. The dark hand in question manifested itself on the TV screens in the players' hotel rooms, where the customary welcome messages awaiting returning guests were replaced with unpleasant threats by enterprising hackers. Following the death of Pablo Escobar, the infant son of the Colombia defender Luis Chonto Herrera had been kidnapped and subsequently returned in Medellin. Following his side's defeat at the hands of Romania, Chonto received word from home that his brother had been killed in a car crash. What should have been the time of these exciting young footballers' lives was rapidly becoming the stuff of nightmares. An unassuming leader, Escobar did his utmost to help his best friend and team to hold things together. That night, Andres kept me company, said Herrera. I wanted to give up and go home, but Andres said, the country depends on you. This is our one shot at the World Cup. Preparations ahead of the game against the United States continued to be less than ideal. The team had received more death threats, even so far as if veteran midfielder Gabriel Gomez was selected for the game, the whole squad would be murdered. Manager Maturana's hands were tied. He had no choice but to bow to the pressure, being forced to jeopardise the chances of the team progressing beyond the group stages. A side that was a shadow of its former self entered the Rose Bowl that afternoon. The swagger and confidence of the team that had qualified so impressively were now crippled by fear, knowing that they had no other choice but to win this game. Despite their fragile mental state, the Colombians started the game brightly, attacking the Americans with all they had, but the ball would defiantly stay out of the USA goal. The clock then ticked over into the 35th minute. A low ball across the box from John Harkes was aimed at Ernie Stewart, but the ball wouldn't reach the American midfielder, as the outstretched leg of Andres Escobar would deflect the ball past his own keeper and into the back of his own net. As Escobar rose to his feet, he trudged back to his position. His demeanour was that of someone who knew what the consequences of this mistake could well entail. The expression on his face would become the haunting image that would define the 1994 World Cup. Escobar's sister recounted the events of that day, watching on from her home in Medellin, as her 9-year-old son said to her, "Mommy, they're going to kill Andres," to which she responded, "No, sweetheart, people aren't killed for mistakes. Everyone in Colombia loves Andres." His teammates certainly didn't blame him. They understood that he had to try and make that interception. It was just one of those things that happened, but they all knew that certain people wouldn't see it that way. The aforementioned Ernie Stewart did get on the score sheet, doubling the USA's lead. Adolfo Valencia did get a goal back in the 90th minute, but it was mere consolation. The Colombians were effectively out of the tournament, falling short of expectations. They did get a 2-0 victory over Switzerland in the final round of games, but needed the US to defeat the Romanians to stand any chance of going through. A Dan Petrescu goal was enough to seal their fate. Colombia were eliminated, finishing bottom of their group. "It's a very trying moment," said Andres Escobar, "not only because of the error I committed, but also because in these games our team could not fulfill our expectations." Escobar was devastated by Colombia's World Cup exit and his very public contribution to it, a contribution he would never watch on television. Upon his return to Medellin, his friends and family rallied around him in a bid to lift his spirits, while his friend Cesar Mauricio Velasquez convinced him to write his cathartic "Life Doesn't End Here" column for El Tiempo. He forgot his worries, said his fiancée. There were warnings, but Andres was young and alive. He wanted to live his life. Had I known what was to come, however, I'd have kept him home that night. Fast forward to just 10 days after the own goal. Escobar decided to head out that night for the first time since returning home from the tournament. He was advised by his close friends, family and even his national manager to stay in and lay low, but Andres insisted that he had to show his face. To show that he could rise above his mistake, it would encourage others to do so as well. Upon arriving at the El Indio bar with his friends, he was met with sarcastic cheering, but enjoyed an evening of revelry, according to eyewitness accounts. At roughly 3 a.m. the following morning, Andres left the premises, but was followed by a group of men who continued to hurl abuse at him. Escobar attempted to reason with the group, claiming that his own goal was nothing more than an honest mistake. The situation escalated, resulting in at least one handgun being produced. Andres Escobar was shot 6 times through the back as he sat at the wheel of his car. It was reported that the killer shouted "Goal" after every shot, once for each time the South American football commentator said it during the broadcast. An ambulance was called, but it was too late. Less than an hour later, Escobar was declared dead. In the wake of the shooting, rumour and speculation surrounded the reason as to why a 27-year-old footballer, who was loved by the nation, had been killed in cold blood for what had been an honest mistake. The murder was widely believed to be punishment for the own goal. 2 people came forward with the licence plate of the truck that drove away from the scene on that fateful night, which was registered to the Gallon brothers, drug traffickers who had left Pablo Escobar's cartel. It is widely believed that the brothers lost a significant amount of money betting on the game. According to one of Pablo Escobar's former enforcers, the Gallons approached the prosecutor's office and bribed them to focus their investigation on Humberto Castro Munoz, one of the bodyguards who was present on the night of the shooting. Whether or not it was he who pulled the trigger that night remains unknown, but Munoz confessed to the murder and was sentenced to 43 years in prison, although he only served 11 years of his sentence and was released on good behaviour. Pamela Cascardo, the fiancée of Andres Escobar, believes that the accusation of the Gallon brothers' bribery of the government officials is supported by Munoz having killed a national celebrity and only serving 11 years in prison. It has since been suggested that had Pablo Escobar still been alive, the Gallon brothers would not have targeted Andres Escobar, as it is widely known that Pablo Escobar was a fervent supporter of the Colombian national football team. Whatever the case may be, it may never be truly known who shot Andres Escobar that night. The only certainty was that a young man in the prime of his career, on the verge of a huge move to a European giant, who was loved and respected by thousands, would now never cross the white line of a football pitch ever again. It is estimated that over 100,000 people came to mourn the passing of Andres Escobar at his funeral in Medellin. Colombian President Cesar Guevara said that Escobar was the victim of the absurd violence affecting the country. Thousands of weeping fans threw flowers in front of the hearse as Andres was taken to his final resting place. More than 20 years on, Andres Escobar remains known around the world as the unfortunate Colombian player who was killed after scoring an own goal at the '94 World Cup. However, he meant so much more to the people of Colombia. Escobar had worked tirelessly to improve the image of the country throughout his life. He is still held in the highest regard by Colombian fans, who still bring flowers and photographs to games on the anniversary of his passing. In June 2002, the city of Medellin unveiled a statue in his honour. In what turned out to be a fitting address to the people of Colombia, Escobar wrote a piece in Bogotá's El Tiempo newspaper following Colombia's elimination from the World Cup, stating, "Life doesn't end here. We have to go on. Life cannot end here. No matter how difficult, we must stand back up. We only have 2 options. Either allow anger to paralyse us and the violence continues, or we overcome and try our best to help others. It's our choice. Let us please maintain respect. My warmest regards to everyone. It's been a most amazing and rare experience. We'll see each other again soon, because life does not end here." That is how the people of Colombia choose to remember him. That is how his legacy should be defined. His words going beyond sport, offering hope to those in times of hardship, adversity and strife. Extending a hand of friendship and uniting those of all creeds, cultures and backgrounds, just like what the sport of football is meant to do.